Okay. Thank you for joining us. We welcomed a few new faces around the table, not strangers, but a few new faces. We welcome Joseph Loda for the MTA, who's joining this meeting in his official capacity, Thomas Madison from the New York State Thruway Authority, and Basil Sagos, who's the new Assistant Secretary for the Environment. We also wished each other a very robust and heartfelt Valentine's Day. Let me also take this moment to thank all of you for a few weeks of an extraordinary effort. We're spending a lot of time as a group now on the road, bringing the message of the state and the budget to communities all across the state. We set a very ambitious goal of 200 presentations. We're going to make that goal, and that's very exciting, and that's only because of the hard work of the people around this table. We're going to go through a few issues and update a few issues today. These are issues that are in the budget in the state of the state. They're in the presentations that you have been giving. I want you to have a little bit more detail on these issues. We've gotten some feedback that when you go to one of these presentations, people feel free to ask you questions on everything. We've added editorial boards to the presentations. We'll do about 50 editorial boards, and the editorial boards tend to have in-depth discussion. It was an eye-opener for me. When I was at HUD, I would go to an editorial board as the HUD secretary, and they would feel free to ask me any question that was going on. Foreign, domestic, it could be anything. And the way they see it, certainly members of the public, you're a member of the president's cabinet, you're a member of the administration, they want to ask you. So similarly, you'll be there, and you'll say, I'm the commissioner of DEC, but they're going to ask you about education, they're going to ask you about Tappan Zee Bridge. You work for the governor, you're part of the state administration, they're going to expect you to know. So we've run into that. And I want to spend a few minutes, update a little more detail on some of the bigger issues that have been coming up. And we'll do that now, and then whatever questions you have on that. We're going to start with Howard Glazer on the Javits Center Genting, what we call the Javits Center Genting proposal. Javits Center proposal was for the largest convention center in the country, as you know, to replace the Javits Center. Javits would still stay, but we would reuse the site. And we've been talking to a company called Genting, which already has a contract for the state for a racino with an R at the aqueduct track and expanding that. This was in the state of the state. You've been talking about it. But we want to give you a little more details on that now. Howard?
Very good. Thank you very much, Governor. And I know you have been traveling around the state, and you do have more travel ahead of all of you, including the Ed Board. So we'll dig down, just give you a little more detail on the status of our discussions and really what the convention center is all about. I won't spend a lot of time talking about the why of a convention center. The Governor has talked about it extensively since the state of the state, around the state, as have you in your presentations. But it's obviously, I think we skipped ahead there. The main point, obviously, jobs and economic activity, and in particular the inability of the Javits Center to compete with the top shows around the country. Our competition right now for Javits is Cleveland, Ohio, Springfield, Massachusetts, and this is a world-class city and a world-class state, so we're looking to have a world-class convention center that can bring jobs and economic activity. Why Aqueduct? Why that location in particular? It's actually not a new idea. They've been talking about this through the Regional Plan Association in New York for some time about moving out to Queens. Why? Space. If you've been to any of the modern large convention centers in this country, whether it's Las Vegas, San Diego, Orlando, you know what they're like. There's a huge footprint. They tend to be long, they tend to be low, they need a lot of space. For a world-class convention center, you need 65 to 100 acres. You're not finding that kind of space, generally speaking, in Manhattan or even very much in the outer boroughs that's available for development. You happen to have it at Aqueduct. Quite apart from the track itself, additional space available at that location. That's why that location. Why Genting? Well, Genting is at Aqueduct as a result of laws passed in 2008 that established a process for putting racinos and VLTs, which are video lottery terminals, don't want to use a lot of jargon, but they had the exclusive rights under the 2008 law, under an MOU that came in 2010, to develop a facility and an entertainment facility on 67 acres for a 40-year period. So they're there. And they're able to do it. They believe it's feasible to put in $3 to $4 billion of private investment to build the world's largest convention center on their 67 acres, creating 4,000 jobs without any state investment involved, all private activity. What is the process that we're currently going through? We have a team which consists of the executive and both houses of the legislature represented in discussions now with Genting to see if we can reach an outline. If we're able to do so, that will be submitted for full review and approval by the legislature, we hope, during the course of this budget negotiation in the coming weeks. Now, the history of VLTs, video lottery terminals, at harness tracks, racinos, and casino gaming in New York is somewhat complicated, but there's always a couple of issues that have been involved historically, and that's no different in the situation that we're in. The first is revenue sharing. It's actually quite amazing. The state currently has 25 different revenue sharing formulas between the 8 VLT facilities that exist at harness tracks and the 5 Indian casinos that currently are authorized. And the revenue share between the state, essentially, and the casino-racino operator varies based on factors like proximity to other facilities, the finances of that specific facility, other geographic issues, as well as the investment and job creation targets to be met by the operator and the investor. And those tax rates range it's a very broad range. Currently, you have a 25% rate to the state, meaning 25 to the state, 75% to the operator, under the legislation authorizing a casino-racino in Sullivan County right now. That's on the low end. To a 70% tax rate to the state at the current Genting facility at Aqueduct. For the Indian casinos, it's even broader. There are 3 different compacts. Under one of the compacts, there's 0 revenue share to the state. Not a penny goes to the state. The other 2 compacts range between 18 to 25% to the state. So there's been a range over the years. It varies. That's always an issue. That will be an issue that we will address here. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But here are major principles as we look at what any new agreement, and this will be true of anybody we did an agreement with as we move forward. The first is that there be no reduction in state revenues in the Genting agreement at all. There's a current agreement in place. They have X number of machines. The state gets 70% of the revenue from those machines, and the state should continue to get that revenue on an ongoing basis. If you add machines, which you need to do in order to have the additional income to make the investment happen for any business proposition, that is essentially a new agreement. That's a new agreement with a different rate. But whatever happens with that, the state revenue can only go up because we're locked in at 70% at the current rate, and then additional revenue from additional income. It's a win-win all around for the state. That's a basic principle we move forward with. Another issue that's out there with harness tracks and racinos in all of the past agreements that has been done is the zone of operation. The Indian compacts in particular have substantial operating zones. The Mohawks have virtually all of the North Country. The Seneca agreements allow them almost all or a significant area in western New York. And there are special rates also for the racinos at the harness tracks. You see the locations here, Tioga, Monticello, Vernon, and Buffalo Raceway. Similarly, Genting currently is the only authorized VLT in the New York City area, and the question will be, what's the geographic adjustment or zone of operation, if any, for VLT operation, expanded VLT operation at the Genting facility. Some other principles, I've already mentioned the one about the income and the new revenue share. Very importantly, we don't have casino gaming today. We may have it, we may not have it going to the future. It's speculative. We have proposed a constitutional amendment that has to be passed twice, 2 years in a row, and then a referendum by the people. But in this agreement, there are no representations whatsoever regarding casino gaming, and absolutely no exclusivity in this agreement regarding future casino gaming. I want to be very clear about that, and you want to be clear about that also, I think, when you're on the road. And as we've mentioned before, there's no state financing, there's no state guarantees of the construction, The only guarantee we seek goes the other way, which is if we are going to make an agreement going forward, then the operator has to meet its revenue target, it has to meet its job creation target and its investment target. The end result, a win-win here. The state of New York gets the largest world-class convention center at no state investment, producing jobs, especially for people in the localities near southeastern Queens, and more people, more jobs coming into New York. That's basically where we are, and I think this will go questions at the end, so I'm going to pass it along at this point to Rowan.
Let me just put a couple of exclamation points, and if there's any question for Howard on this, we'll do that now. On the, just a couple of points of where I think you'll get questions. One, and Howard, as usual, did a great job of laying out all the facts. No state money. Well, convention centers are risky. And convention centers are often loss leaders and have to be justified as loss leaders when they're built. This is no state money. So we would be getting the use of and having the largest convention center in the country without any investment of state money. Well, why would Genting do it? Because they're not building just the convention center. Genting builds resort destinations. Genting also operates cruise ships. Their mentality is, you build the right resort destination, they will come. They're not building a convention center. They're building an entire destination complex. They're building exhibition halls. They're building a larger Racino with more VLTs. That's one of the incentives for them. They would get more VLT machines. So they believe they build a larger facility with more VLTs, they will have more people coming, and it'll be a better business for them. They are already, by the way, doing very well from a business point of view. Howard's point about this is the only discussion is about a Racino, which is the current law, VLTs, video lottery terminals. There is no conversation about what if the casino law changes. Why? First of all, it's a big what if. You need 2 votes of the legislature. We haven't even had the first vote. You then need a referendum. Second, I don't want to have any conversation about the day after casinos become legal, because I would want to make sure that the state is in a place where you have a clean slate. The state can come up with a plan for competing casinos, siting casinos, and there are no givens. We could have a new entity that starts with a clean slate, because one of the things we have to do is we have to make sense of the current hodgepodge we have to begin with. You look at these Racinos and VLTs, and why certain rates on some and other rates on others. What was the range? From 0 on some Indian...
0 to 70 right now.
0 on some Indian casinos to 70, which is at Genting, and the other tracks are in the middle. You know, I don't even want to try to figure out what they did here, frankly. Why did the tracks wind up with the exclusive VLT contracts? Why? Why do some tracks pay so much more and other tracks pay so much less? Who negotiated them, how and why? Then you have the larger question of, what are you going to do with OTBs around the state, which are a problem to begin with? What are you going to do with NYRA? You know, how do you rationalize all these pieces? So if casino gaming becomes real, it will be an opportunity for the state to come up once and for all with a comprehensive gaming program that it can implement. If Genting doesn't want to pursue this only on the basis of a Racino, there will be no conversation. So it'll be very simple. Because we're not going to anticipate anything on the condition of casino gaming. But where we are now, it would be a win-win for the state. Any questions on this for Howard? Okay. Let's go to Roanne and Larry are going to talk about the business consolidations. This is important to all of you. Basically what we're trying to do is consolidate the back office overhead functions. Not every one of you has to be a human resources office. Not every one of you has to be a fleet manager. Not every one of you has to be your own procurement officer. How do you consolidate those back office functions, primarily at OGS, and free you up to do the substantive part of your job and save the taxpayers some money by consolidating the service? Roanne.
Thank you, Governor, but you just said my whole speech.
But you say so much better.
Well, when I was here in October as the governor, thank you very much, Governor, we talked about our plan to make this government perform better by consolidating our back office functions such as procurement, real estate, human resources, and IT. As the governor said, it makes no sense to replicate these basically identical functions across dozens of agencies, and it really does cost too much, and more importantly, it distracts our agencies and all of you from your core mission of delivering your programs and services. We've already begun consolidating our procurement and our real estate services, and on procurement, instead of multiple contracts from different agencies for the same product or service, we are getting the best price with a single contract. Our new contract for personal computers and will save our state procurement $6.4 million, and local governments and school districts and other non-executive agencies could save up to $40 million. We are doing the same with everything from office supplies and security guards to food service and road materials. Overall, we anticipate a savings of $100 million, all funds, for this year in the 2012-13 budget, and $755 million over 5 years by consolidating our procurements. On the real estate side, we are accomplishing our goal to bring vacancy rates down from 25%, where we saw in both lease space and owned space, to the industry standards. As you know, moves have already started. You've written about them, realigning space in state-owned buildings to make room for those leaving our lease space, and moving agencies from spaces where leases have expired to state-owned space. To make all this happen, we have created an interagency team of over 100 professionals who are really focused on procurement and real estate from a government-wide perspective and not agency silos. And I know some of you have lent us, some of your staff, the experts in real estate as well as in certain procurement categories. In the short time, we have proven that this really does work. This model works. Over the coming year, we will need to do more to truly consolidate the back office administrative functions. And the executive budget will facilitate the progress and process of migrating our administrative operations to OGS, and will allow our agencies to better focus on their mission.
Thank you, Roanne. I'll be brief. What Commissioner DeStito has been talking about, and what I'm going to add to it, is really transformational in terms of the way state government has operated in the past. What Governor Cuomo has been talking about since he took office, bottom line is make government work better, make government cost less. It's all about performance, it's all about accountability, and quite frankly, the way you accomplish that is you tear down the silos, you flatten out the government, you make it horizontal. And one of the key areas where Commissioner DeStito just talked about is we need standardization. We need to take a lot of these common functions that each agency does, put it and house it in one agency, have that agency handle those administrative functions, as she mentioned, the core mission and function of each of the individual state agencies. You're able to deliver those services better because you're not worried about the day-to-day admin functions of your agency, and it all gets housed. And one of the things that the governor has proposed in the 2012-13 budget is an expansion of this enterprise effort, which is to create in this Office of General Services a business service center where all the admin functions, primarily in the area of human services and financial services, will all be housed in OGS. We're going to do this in 2 phases. Phase 1, you'll see these are the first 29 state agencies, which we will merge into OGS. At the same time, while that integration is going on, Commissioner DeStito and her team will be meeting with all the other state agencies to begin the Phase 2 integration of these other larger agencies in terms of merging their back office operations. As I said again, this is very transformational. Whether you look at the strategic sourcing initiative that the government has put forward, that Commissioner DeStito is carrying over, no longer are you going to have multiple agencies buying the same item at a different price. That means government's costing less. That means government's working better. No more will you see a situation where we find out, because everything was done in a silo, where we realized that we had more than a 25% vacancy rate. We didn't realize that we had vacancies in leased areas. By now consolidating all these functions, housing the data in a centralized location, we're going to be able to make better management systems, save taxpayer money, make government perform better, make government more accountable, and provide a real service to the taxpayers of this state.
Just one point I would add on this. Don't underestimate the amount of heartburn, tsuris, agita, whatever your word, that this is going to cause, back to that silo mentality. I can hear it already, and I hear it through the legislature. It's a no-brainer managerially. They've been talking about doing this for decades. It's like so many other things in this town. We should, we just never can, because change is hard and it requires energy and focus. We have to consolidate the administrative functions. I mean, Larry said it well. We literally buy the same thing at different prices all across the government. And we've been doing all these downsizings. Every one of you will say we don't have enough personnel to do the job in an optimum way. But yet we've been squandering, frankly, resources on all these back office overhead tasks that should have been consolidated once and for all. But you go to consolidate it, you run into that turf, but you run into the very real but parochial issue of, I now do the admin in DOT. I don't want to go do it from OGS. I want to do it in DOT. You know, I have to move, which is real and is understandable. But in my opinion, it's not enough of a basis to stop the reform. And you'll hear this at your budget hearings from the legislators. Well, if you move the function, we have to move the money for the personnel, and where is it going to go? It's only going to go to Roanne. She's not a foreign land. She's a nice person. They can call her up and talk to her, and it'll all be fine. Any questions on this for Roanne or Larry?
I've heard concerns, particularly from the legislature. First of all, I think it's fabulous and something that absolutely has to be done. The governor should be commended. Can you tell me a little bit in response of the concern of moving money back and forth after the budget is done, and how that could be, we need to do it to accomplish the consolidation. Can you explain that a little bit?
Thank you, Barb. And I've heard it too from the legislators. But when you explain it to them, I think they really do get it. Right now, as I said, we're moving procurement people, real estate people, and HR people from other agencies. But right now, they have to stay on your payroll, on the agency payroll. They're working on, we have the 37th floor in the Corning Tower is really where we have people working side by side, whether it's real estate, procurement, and soon it will be HR. As Larry pointed out, we'll have the Business Service Center. But the way it works now, the administrative people have to stay on their home agency payroll, and what we're asking in this budget is only the language we need to transfer them over to the OGS payroll, and so the positions can follow as they migrate over to OGS. And it'll be a centralized government-wide, either real estate procurement, HR office. And it's just really to enable this back office operation funds to move with the people, so we can get your funds with the people that are already working with us. And I think when the legislators, first heard it, they thought it was program funds. They thought that we were going to be moving, all kinds of dollars. It's just the money that follows the people. And I think that once it's explained to them, when they understand it, I think they will really, support it, because I think it's the right thing to do. And I know that it's been something that I've been talking about since I was chair of the Governmental Operations Committee. Thank you.
Now you get to do it. How nice is that? You talked about it as a legislator, and now you do it in the
Talk to you
executive.
about it. Yeah, it's a great thing. It's full circle.
Yes, you did talk to me about it.
I did.
And I had the good suggestion of saying, if it's such a good idea, why don't you come over and do it?
And it's the right thing to do, Governor. You have the right idea.
Yeah,
Thank
no, it's
you.
going to be good.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Gil Quinones on what is a really exciting, revolutionary idea that I think is going to make a major difference in the state. It's going to be shocking in its impact, which is the energy highway that we talk about, likening it to the Eisenhower highway grid. And I'm very excited about it. Gil has been all over it, and Gil is going to give us some more information on it now.
Thank you. The governor, in his 2012 State of the State address, put forward a sweeping public-private initiative to upgrade and modernize New York State electric system. And it is a very critical, as the governor mentioned, initiative for the state. It promises to provide clean, reliable, safe, and environmentally responsible energy for generations of New Yorkers while creating jobs and spurring private investment in the state. And as we recover from the deepest economic downturn since the Great Depression, the governor has made abundantly clear that there is no better time than today to invest in our infrastructure and to take bold and courageous actions to spur a stronger economic future for New York State. The Energy Highway initiative addresses the following realities. We have an aging generation and transmission infrastructure in the state, and I will discuss that in a little bit more detail as I go through my presentation. We have congestion points in our transmission system, historic congestion points, such as in the areas between Utica and Albany and the Hudson Valley. Especially in the hottest of the hottest days, we do not have an effective and efficient way to transmit electricity where it is produced and to where the load centers are in the state. We also need to prepare for upcoming environmental regulations at the federal level. It's not widely known, but there are at least 6 critical environmental rulemakings at the EPA that will impact the electric infrastructure industry across the nation. With technology from our homes, flat screen TVs, to new materials and controls of our grid, we need to evolve and adapt our electric system. And lastly, similar to the governor's initiatives in investing in our roads, bridges, wastewater, water infrastructure, and flood control facilities, investing in our energy infrastructure provides tremendous economic opportunity and job creation in our state. But before I go on, I've been asked, what is the Energy Highway? And so what I'd like to do is to describe to you the 4 parts that comprise our energy infrastructure. Starts with generation, which are power plants, including wind farms; transmission, which is the backbone to transmit our electricity; distribution, that connects the wires to eventually our homes and businesses. While the governor's strategy is still focused on energy efficiency and advancing clean energy technologies. When we mention or when we say the energy highway, we mean the generation and the transmission portion of the energy infrastructure spectrum. And it is an aging infrastructure, as I had mentioned. First, with transmission, the utilities in New York State, including the New York Power Authority and the Long Island Power Authority, have been planning and looking at the condition of our grid for the past 2 years and the things that we need to do to make sure that it's ready for the future. In this chart, all the dark lines, this is a map of the state and our transmission system. All the dark lines are transmission infrastructure that are expected to be replaced or upgraded over the next 10 years. And it is an extensive system. Similarly, with our power plants, about 42% of our power plants in the state are over 40 years old. 22% are over 50 years old. Just to give you some numbers, when I say 40 years old, that's about 360 individual power plants of various sizes and types in the state. Very clear that it needs vital investment and renewal. So the governor has formed a task force of the relevant statewide energy, economic development, and environmental agencies to collaborate, to work together, and to advance this initiative. And we have already begun work. We are excited, and we are determined to make sure that we execute and implement this initiative as effectively and efficiently as possible. So what are our next steps? First, we are hosting a summit at Columbia University to bring the best minds in terms of energy policy, other states and regions where we can learn best practices and lessons learned. Our partners in the federal government, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, Department of Energy, along with our own state regulators and state energy entities to discuss creating the right environment to spur investment in our state. We will then issue a request for information. We will cast a wide net to get the best ideas from developers and investors to solve this energy highway dilemma. After that, we will have a conference of interested parties and potential responders to make sure that they understand what is expected in the RFI. And in the late spring, we will get the responses of the RFI, analyze that result, and create an action plan that we will submit as a task force to the governor. You know, the first power plant was built in Lower Manhattan, exactly on Pearl Street. And the first successful transmission of long-distance transmission of electricity occurred in Western New York from Niagara Falls to Buffalo. With the governor's vision of the energy highway, New York is once again poised to be the leader in innovation and in the electric industry sector. And for a utility person like me, an engineer like me, that is pretty cool and exciting. Thank you very much.
I'm all about utility too. Yeah. Well done. I think this is going to be very exciting. The early spring, are you thinking, you have an idea when, early spring?
Most likely the first week of April, Governor.
First week of April. I think that is going to be, that's going to be an extraordinary conference. And I would recommend anyone who has any interest, it might be something you want to attend. I recommend that personally, not as governor. That's not a mandate. We hate mandates. But there is no state that has done this like this. There is no state, no big state, that has said, here's the full system We want to change the full system. Private sector companies tell us the best way to do it. How could you do it? How could you finance? What would it mean for the ratepayers? But we want to look at the entire system. And what Gil and the task force are doing, they're casting a very wide net. They're saying to companies all across the country, come, look at what we have on the table, and give us your best ideas. Then they're going to go with the RFI, et cetera. Any questions for Gil on this? Okay. Last but not least, speaking of national interest, there was an article today in one of the papers that said people are looking to New York to see whether or not the teacher evaluation actually gets worked out between state education department and the unions. This is much the buzz. Teacher evaluations is probably the greatest reform in education. States have been working on it, but no state has really come up with a really good system yet and implemented it. And New York would actually be on the cusp of that. So Larry's going to give us an update on where we are on the teacher evaluation.
Thank you, Governor. I will just say to you that, and to everyone here in the cabinet meeting, that all the parties have been working very hard. I think all the meetings and conversations that have taken place to date have been very constructive, they've been productive, and they've been fruitful. I think all parties are committed to reaching an agreement prior to Thursday. And I do think there's a collegiality in the air in these meetings and in these discussions and negotiations that the students have to come first here. This is all about improving student learning. This is also about giving the tools to teachers so they can learn to be better teachers in the classroom, because ultimately, the stronger you are as a teacher, the better the kids in the classroom are going to learn and perform. And it's basically looking at all the best practices in the country and putting them together in an agreement so that every school district, because this is statewide, this is not just limited to New York City, it's for every school district here in the state of New York, that we have a system in place that can be implemented timely that will benefit kids in the classroom throughout the state.
Remember, there's two hurdles here. Hurdle one is the state has to complete its work on designing a statewide system, statewide regs. That's State Education Department and the unions by this Thursday. They've been working on that for 2 years since the law passed. We basically said, if you don't have it done by Thursday, we can amend the budget. Don't get any ideas for your agencies. We can amend the budget up until Thursday. And if they don't agree, we'll put our own teacher evaluation plan in as part of a budget amendment. If they don't, that was our way of incentivizing them to work it out themselves. That's the first hurdle. Once we get past that, so on Thursday they either agree by Thursday, or we put in our own evaluation plan. Step two is once you have a state plan and state regs, every school district, 700 plus, have to come up with their own version within the state regs, which is a subject of collective bargaining. They have 1 year to do that. If they don't have it done in 1 year, they will not be eligible for the 4% increase in state funding. When people talk about it, especially at an ed board, they conflate the two things. They're two discrete steps. Once we get past Thursday, it doesn't mean every local school district has adopted a plan. It just means there's a statewide template that they now can accept. So there's two steps. Any questions on teacher evaluation?
Larry, I have a question. There's a lot of talk out there about the appeals process in the law. Is that appeals process a statewide issue, or is it just for the city?
It's a very good question. Obviously, New York City has gotten a lot of attention and press coverage, but we're talking about a statewide law. and an appeals process which gets collectively bargained under the law applies to every school district in the state of New York. As a matter of fact, Matt, Syracuse is already under the law, has already agreed to with its teachers union to an expedited appeals process. The problem in New York City, which has gotten a lot of attention, is that unfortunately the relationship between the teachers union and the administration has gotten very toxic. And it's made it very difficult for the two parties to sit down and constructively negotiate. Quite frankly, that's why they asked the governor basically to intervene to try to help, broker a solution to this thing. And, my only concern, this is a challenge. It is not an impossible challenge to overcome. But I'm just hoping that the hostility between the two parties hasn't gotten so bad and out of control that it's going to paralyze any effort to reach an agreement on an appeals process. I mean, one of the last things I just want to say, the way this whole law has evolved over time, once upon a time when they first talked about this, in order to get the $700 million federal money, the only thing anyone ever talked about or seemed to be focused on was charter schools. There's so much more to this law. There's so much more value and importance for school kids, including my own 8th grade daughter, in this law so they can learn better. But everyone was focused on how many charter schools we're going to pass, who gets to approve charter schools. Now we seem to be just focused on an appeals process when this is more about learning and how to improve performance in the classroom for our New York State kids. But clearly, hopefully that people will put politics aside, they'll put turf aside in order for us to be able to reach an agreement on the appeals process as well as the law overall, so that the kids of the state will benefit from that agreement.
Matt, just so you remember, the 2010 law, when it was passed, was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Everybody supported it. They all cheered. It was highly negotiated, very complicated, but everybody celebrated it. That's Larry's point. Also, remember, when it comes to New York City and the appeals process, that's step 2, right? New York City is one of the school districts that would have to adopt it. I'm worried today about step 1, which is what happens on Thursday. Once you have the statewide plan, okay, now district by district, and New York City already has an issue on this appeals. And we're trying to help New York City on the appeals issue now, but really, that's different than the Thursday timetable. Thursday is going to be tricky enough, and that's going to be step 1. All right, let me end where I started. These road trips are vitally, vitally important. I know they take a lot of time. I know they take you away from your family. I know, they're not the largest presentations. We're doing so many that maybe there's only an audience of 100 people. But they work. They work. When people say to me, well, what was the secret formula for last year? How did you get the legislature? Blah, there was no secret formula. We did this. We took the time to go to the people, to explain it to the people, and democracy works, and the people in this building respond to the people in their districts, or the people in this building are no longer here, myself included. That is a simple, inarguable equation. And what people here in their district, they do. So go to their district. But there are a lot of districts. I know. We did it last year. We're doing it this year. We, collectively, we. And adding the ed boards, that's just another point of communication. So I hope this was helpful, going through some of the specifics. We'll have next week or so, we didn't do it all today. There are about another 2 or 3 topics that have been coming up, and we'll do this again in the next week or so. And if something is coming up that you're not familiar with, just call in, get the information, and let us know, so maybe we'll add it to the agenda. Any questions from the press for me?
Governor, on the teacher evaluations, there's some concern of some of the special cases, and I'm wondering if these are part of the discussions. They're concerned about special ed teachers, Larry, English language learners, those teachers that aren't really set up to handle the 4th and 8th grade tests, but they'll be judged on this. The other concern is that you've probably read in Chinatown, where students are going to China for lengthy visits, Dominicans also in the city, that they'll be gone at Christmas time. Are all of these considerations being thought of in this, and in complete fairness to the teachers?
Well, you know, Mike, I don't think, again, this is a law that was passed, heralded by the teachers' unions and by SED and by the legislators. I don't know specifically, but the points you are raising don't seem like they're that nuanced. I'm sure they were contemplated by the law. And remember, these are all locally bargained plans. And the school district's point is you need that level of customization, school district by school district. You know anything specific on?
It's exactly on point.
Governor, on the appeals process, the mayor's people seem to have hoped, put out hope that you would include it either in your plan or the statewide plan. Have they expressed that to you, and do you indeed say that's not going to happen?
No. The mayor has said that he can't agree on an appeals process with his union. I have said that I will be helpful in that regard. If we can work it out, and if it requires statutory language, I would put it in the budget. But we would have to be able to work it out for me to have the language to include in the budget. If we can't work it out by Thursday, all is not lost because we have the year for the implementation. But the mayor has said he needs help with his union. I understand it. I've spoken to the mayor's people. I've spoken to the union myself. Conversations are continuing. And we're working very hard. Maybe we get there by Thursday. But if we don't, you then have the second dynamic, which is also important for you. We have two triggers. SED and the union, after 2 years, have to do it by Thursday or will do it, which is an incentive. Second, if the local districts don't do it at the end of the year, they lose the 4%. New York City, that will be hundreds of millions of dollars. What could it be, Bob? It's 500 without the SIG
Could be
schools.
300 million? 40% at least?
At least $300 million. So if the city didn't work it out at the end of the year, they could lose $300 million. Nobody wants to be in that position, Ken. And that incentive, district by district, it applies to every district, I think you're going to see that incentivize cooperation on both sides, management and labor. Because if the school district doesn't get money, the school district is going to start talking about layoffs. That's going to affect the union. So I think it's an incentive that works both ways.
As a follow, you said that you're trying to work it out, and if you do, you would put it in Thursday. However, you're not using that option for the state ed and NYSET. You're saying if they can't work it out, you're going to put your plan in. Why not do something similar here and say, you know what, if the city and its union can't come to it, we'll just put in our plan, and they'll have to live with it.
Yeah, but I don't have a specific plan between the mayor and the city. You know, this is, by definition, this is a locally bargained factor of the plan, right? The plan, pursuant to the law, leaves certain issues to the localities to negotiate. This is one of them, the appeals process. The law, the plan that's going to be passed says the localities must do this. New York City, in a peculiar twist, is saying, but we can't work it out. First answer will be, well, if you don't work it out at the end of the year, you're going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. Does that change the trajectory of the conversations? And in the meantime, let me see if I can help. And I'm talking to the mayor and I'm talking to the unions, and let me see if I can help work it out.
A federal judge has ruled that a special master should take up the redistricting process. How, in your view, does this impact redistricting as it stands now, and how does it impact your plan to veto LATFOR's lines?
You know, Nick, I think, had the conversation in this room. I said this is going to wind up in the courts. By the way, it always winds up in the courts. This always winds up between the legislature and the courts. This is not the first time we've been to this dance, right? So I'm not surprised that the courts have gotten involved. And this is primarily up to the legislature. You know, they are in charge of their own destiny here, and they will make decisions and weigh their options. But am I surprised the courts have stepped in? No, not at all.
Governor, do you think, teacher eval, do you reserve the right to review any agreement that, say, state ed and unions would make? And if it doesn't, it's not something that you would like, you would still want to impose your own plan, or is it just as long as they reach a resolution, that's fine with you?
Well, Yancey, there's an added fact. I sent them a letter a few months back that stated my position on a number of elements in the plan. They have told us that they are taking that seriously. So, and the law is a highly prescriptive law. There's not a lot of wiggle room, which is one of the reasons why I'm optimistic that they're going to get it done.
Another question on the teacher evaluation. If the mayor asked, for you to be helpful in resolving this disagreement over the arbitration issue, why not take a position on that, on whether it should be the city education department under mayoral control to have final say over assigning these ratings?
Yeah, because Jacob, first, I am trying to be helpful. We're having another meeting this afternoon. I've spent an inordinate number of hours trying to be helpful. By definition, this issue is left up to local control. When this plan, let's say SED works it out, oh, by the way, by my own plan, the appeals process is to be locally determined. You're saying, well, why doesn't the governor determine it for New York? Because the governor is about to accept a plan that says this should be locally determined. That's what the law said.
Governor, they don't want it to be at this point after so much
No,
time.
no, not they. The mayor doesn't want it to be. Yeah, I know.
That's the mayor's position, that it's been so much time they can't settle this. Maybe the only way to do it is by changing the legislation.
To say
changing the
what?
law.
Whatever
so
the-
that it wouldn't be local, it would be a more standardized state.
Well, how would you write it, Jacob?
We have to have a conversation later on.
Send me your language.
We've heard a lot about the administration's efforts to find marginal savings. Do you think that localities can bear the estimated $50 million cost of a legislative primary in September?
Can they? Should they? Since we're on language now, we've gone beyond concept to language, right, in this conversation? No, they should not.
Would you be willing to make that case to the legislature that they
Yes,
need to
I
come to
have.
an agreement? Would you advocate for the June date that Judge Sharp is?
I will advocate for, I don't know that it's my place to pick a date for the legislature, but I think it would be a waste of money to have numerous elections, and we cannot afford it.
An editorial noted yesterday that you support the minimum wage. Does that mean that you support this specific proposal put out by the Speaker?
No, I don't know what the editorial said. I have supported the minimum wage in the past. I support the concept of the minimum wage. However, the devil is in the details on the specific proposal, and this proposal we're examining, and I haven't taken a position on this proposal yet, and I will do so in consultation with both houses.
Ms. DeStito just articulated what I think was the rationale for this language that you put throughout your budget, giving the administration flexibility to move money even after its adoption. And as you alluded, there's a concern among legislators that this is a power grab. Some have even said that. Would you be willing to just amend it to make it more explicit, to say that this is for back office functions?
I am willing, first of all, Jimmy, you have reporters and you have editors. They do two different things. And sometimes there's a tension between those two, right? Editor changes your lead, and you say, editor is wrong, or whatever you might say. The question is, that tension can be a good thing. It can make you a better reporter, it can make the editor a better editor, and it can create a better product for both of you. The legislature has one role, the executive has another role. I'm trying to manage this government. I'm trying to find efficiencies in this government. Now, the legislature could say, there's nothing you can possibly do to improve the management of this government. This is the Swiss watch of state governments. Don't touch anything, because you can only make it worse. Leave it just the way it is, because we have hit management perfection. It is a beautiful thing. That could be their position. I don't believe that's their position. They then assert their prerogative. Before you make any changes dealing with any money, we have the power of the purse. We want to know exactly what it is. I say, how can I manage if I have to tell you in advance every dollar, and you're not even here half the time, et cetera? That is a normal and usual tension. And you manage the tension. And it can come up with a better product. Will we talk to them if they have concerns? Look, it depends how you want to say it. If the legislature says the governor wants to move money around after the budget is passed, more power for the governor. Ooh, how ominous. And of course, that would not be a good thing from the legislature's point of view. Governor wants the power of the purse now too, stepping over the legislature. That's not what this is. This is a, frankly, somewhat unexciting but essential management alignment of back office overhead, and rather than detailing people, actually assigning people, which means you'd have to move that amount of money that goes with those bodies. That's what this is.
Governor, but a related question. Under a system of checks and balances, what do you see as the role of the legislature here?
Exactly what they do. This tension is a productive, healthy tension. I believe that.
You're saying that it's not you want to change what they do.
No, I don't want to
that's
change
under your
what they do. No, Jacob, I don't want to change what they do. I respect what they do. I want them to do what they do. I respect the role. We then have specific questions on a bill-by-bill basis, initiative by initiative. What's the legislature's role? What's the governor's role in this specific? This specific is, I want to consolidate back office tasks because I believe it'll make the government more efficient. The legislature says, well, I want to know exactly what back office tasks before you do it. All right, now this will be a conversation on the specifics of what do you need to know and when. That's, I get the role of the reporter, I get the role of the editor. It then becomes a story-by-story question. Is the editor right in changing that adverb? And then you have that discussion. You understand what I'm saying?
You're the editor, and then the legislature is the
No,
reporter.
I am managing the government, right? I'm the governor. Do we agree to that? I am in charge of the executive. Do we agree to that? And these are commissioners who are managing the agencies. I submit a budget. They comment, change, pass, or don't pass a budget. This is one of the items in the budget.
Governor, just to go back to Jimmy's question, though. So if that's the intent and the purpose, and the legislature doesn't get it, why don't you amend what you want, just to limit it to
My
back
guess
office?
is, Michael, through the conversations, Roanne's suggestion is she had the conversations and they understand it now. Or if they don't, we'll make sure they do.
On that point, there's been some criticism of public authorities, and you've been critical of public authorities when you were Attorney General. The idea in the budget that you'd be able to move money between public authorities, in part for your New York Works program, there's some concern about the accountability of public authorities having that additional ability.
It's the same basic point, Joe. On one side, you have management flexibility. On the other side, you have legislative supervision, and you have to find the balance.
Public authorities, there's an additional concern that they're not as transparent as, say, perhaps
Yes.
other.
Yeah, so the question is, what is the balance? How do you strike the management efficiencies and allow these people to actually manage an agency, but do it within the context of legislative supervision, oversight, and authorization?
Governor, on that, would projects under the New York Works Fund, would that have to go through the Public Authorities Control Board under your proposal?
I don't know.
Bonded programs, any bonded program would still have to go to PACB, nothing would change.
Yes.
Governor, you mentioned and talked a lot about gambling earlier. You obviously pushed for an amendment. When was the last time you gambled in a casino? When was the last time you
Many,
gambled?
many years ago, and I lost.
Where was it?
But I don't hold that against the industry.
Is it in Las Vegas, Atlantic City?
I have been to Las Vegas, I've been to Atlantic City. I don't know which place I've been to last.
So have you gambled in any of the racinos?
No.
When was the last time you played the lottery?
Months. Months.
Governor, in light of Nick Spano's plea deal that he made last week, do you think there should be restrictions on lobbyists who have been convicted of crimes? Should they continue to lobby state government, lobby, say, their former colleagues?
It's a good question, Nick. I haven't focused on it. I don't believe the current law disqualifies a person who's been convicted of a felony. But it's a good question. I haven't looked at it, and I haven't reviewed it, and I don't have an opinion on it at this point.
Governor, a question on the Tappan Zee Bridge. You had $5 million, I believe, in the budget. Was it 5? Pardon?
We projected a $5 billion cost.
Is that staying there, or is it moving, or is it ever going to happen?
Is the bridge ever going to happen? Otherwise, you'll be looking at a lot of former, or you're looking at a lot of former commissioners if the bridge doesn't happen. I can tell you that much, Betty. No one specifically, Joan. The bridge is going to happen. One of the reasons why it's so important that we do the bridge is precisely for the intimation in that question, Betty. You know, we've been talking about doing the bridge for so long. People are now incredulous that it's ever going to happen. And they're sort of incredulous about our capacity to even make it happen. You know, in their skepticism is, I don't even know that government is capable of doing a big project like that anymore. And that's a frightening concept to me. I understand why they say it. It's just a magnification of their belief of government incompetence. But we have to do it because we need the bridge. We're wasting money. It's a safety issue. And we will do it. And it is proceeding on an expedited basis. As a matter of fact, you know what, Howard? That is worth doing an update for this group. You will get this question about the Tappan Zee all across the state, and we will do an update at the next meeting. Joan, if you remind me.
Where is the money going to come from specifically?
We'll have a financing plan as part of the bridge project. Part of it's going to be state. We're looking at a number of other financing vehicles.
Could you sell bonds?
We could.
Would you?
Would you buy them? And we'll sell them.
The controller's been upset, saying that you're taking away, you want to take away his authority to pre-audit state contracts in the budget.
I'm
What
sorry
is
he's
that?
upset. We don't want to take away the controller's authority. We're trying to streamline the contracting process. The quote-unquote pre-audit function can add months to the contracting process. Everybody wants management efficiency. Everybody wants us to save money. Everybody wants government to work. Everybody wants government to be able to build a bridge. So we're trying to find ways to streamline, accelerate the contracting process.
He makes the point, though, that he's found some contracts that had errors or would have cost too much, or and that he had saved the government money by some of these pre-audits. So, I mean,
You want to make the point? Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
It's only statewide contracts and strategically sourced contracts. It's a small portion. And the controller always has the ability to audit, post-audit. And we always, most agencies, and now OGS, we always work with the Office of State Controller very closely when we put RFPs out, when we put information for bid, invitation to bid documents out there. So we work with them very closely. OGS has a very strong relationship and tie with the Office of State Controller. But it's a small contract. It's a small area.
But post-contract, though, the money's spent.
But he always has the ability, if he wants to stop a contract, if he sees a problem, he can stop the payment. There's always the ability to stop payment and hold money.
And Karen, Rowan's point is, the Commissioner DeStito's point is, it's not all contracts, it's only a small segment of the contracts. And look, in every issue, guys, there's always you have the same balance. It is delay, expense versus the benefit. Let's slow down every contract for 3 months. Okay. And what is the benefit? You know, how many times, what is the benefit? How many times do you actually find something? And all of these are a balance. And tongue-in-cheek, but I'll repeat it. Unless you take the position that everything is fine in this state government and there's no reason to improve it, then we're just trying to make a historically dysfunctional government function. And that means there are going to be changes. But when we go to consolidate HR, people oppose it. Yes. Well, if you try to streamline contracting, there's going to be opposition. Yes. Any change brings opposition. Excuse me one second. Any change brings opposition. You have to understand that. Because otherwise, you will develop a culture where nobody bothers trying to change anything. Because the opposition to the change outweighs the benefit. And people just get beaten down. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people who worked for the state for a long time. And they'll say, oh, I've been telling them that for years. We tried to do that 10 years ago, but they said this. I understand that change brings opposition. Change is frightening. Change also brings risk. I get that. This is a government that needs a lot of change if it's going to thrive and be competitive. If you say you can't change, now you bring us all to a very bad place. I was elected to reform and bring change to Albany. That is why I am here. That is my mandate. That's what the people of the state want. I understand it might disrupt the status quo in Albany. I understand it will disrupt the power forces in Albany. I understand it will disrupt the special interests that designed this system and like it just the way it is, that spent a lot of time and money to put every comma, every parenthetical, and every caveat into the law. I was elected to do something else.
Do you think Tom DiNapoli is a good controller?
I think he's a good controller.
Mayor Bloomberg has said that the 2010 evaluation law basically doesn't work. I'm curious if you think it is a workable model, and if so, how would your system change if you impose your own system?
Do I think, I'm sorry, Mayor Bloomberg said?
Mayor Bloomberg basically said that the 2010 law doesn't work, that he thinks it needs to be, a new law needs to be passed in terms of evaluations. And you said you would impose your own system if they can't come to an agreement. Do you think the current law, the 2010 law, is workable, and how would your system differ?
Well, first, again, remember everybody supported the 2010 law. I was not here. I did not support the 2010 law. So I have no pride of authorship about the law at all. The mayor is saying he can't work out the appeals process, is what the mayor is saying. I don't think the mayor is saying the whole evaluation process doesn't work. He's saying he can't work out the appeals process with his union, and he wants help working it out or a statutory change to make it go away, right? But I don't think the mayor is saying the whole evaluation process is no good.
Governor, a question on cigarette taxes. What is your approach in terms of tax collections to cigarettes being manufactured increasingly by Indian tribes and sold to non-Indians on their territory?
I don't think we've taken a position on that, Tom, have we?
Well, Tom, since we spent a half an hour on this earlier this week, we can walk through it again as well. But, you know, the law permits us to tax cigarettes that are manufactured by Native Americans but sold to non-Native Americans. We do that at the wholesale level. That's the way the federal government does it, and we follow their lead.
Governor, I'm sorry, you're talking about the cost benefit. What is the benefit, I guess, I might be able to imagine, but what is the benefit of speeding up that process so the pre-audit isn't there? And also, when's the last time you spoke with the controller yourself?
Contracting, an efficient contracting process is important for these people to be able to do their jobs. You know, if you order pens and the pen contract takes a year to get a pen, it could slow you down in what you do in your job. So their ability to contract, purchase, get equipment, get supplies is important. We were just looking at vehicle inventory. The years of the vehicles wasn't lining up with the purchase date. It took about 2 years to buy a car. So, you know, if you need a car and it took 2 years to get a car, that could be a problem. So if you want the government to work and you have that dysfunctional a purchasing system, that's a problem.
And when was the last time you spoke with the controller, and how's that relationship?
Would have been the state of the state. Look, the relationship, you guys, just because you don't agree on everything doesn't mean you don't have a good relationship, right? As a matter of fact, if you agreed on everything, that would probably be evidence of a situation where someone isn't doing their job. We have different roles. That's why I use the reporter and the editor. If they agree on everything, someone's not doing their job. Controller has one role, legislature has one role, Senate has a role, Assembly has a role, and there's a tension among these roles. Fine. That's the check and the balance. That's the give and the take. That's important. That's important. And it's a constant calibration. Daily News today in the editorial basically says, I'm not being aggressive enough. That's one opinion. You know, so it's, you know, there's a calibration to it, and sometimes you're a little high, sometimes you're a little low, and you work it through. Tom?
Governor, you talked to Senator DeSantis since last Friday night.
I have not spoken with him, no.
Do you have any comments on that incident?
You know, let's just, as I understand it now, there's an ongoing investigation into the matter. So I don't have any comment on it. I do wish him and his wife the best, especially when I heard about it. I've met his wife. Obviously, I worked with the senator on a number of matters, and I was concerned about the health of his wife, and I hope she's doing well.
Have you had any communication with them? Email, text?
No, I left him a message over the weekend, but I haven't spoken with him.
Governor, on the topic of change, state traffic engineers, well before your administration, but your administration seems to be continuing, are on a program of substituting for stoplights traffic circles throughout upstate, and I assume probably downstate as well. You can find places like off of exit 12 of the Northway in Malta, where there are literally 5 different traffic circles within a mile. A lot of people think this is rather strange, and I know the argument is that they're safer than stoplights, but do you have any thoughts on this? Are you completely on board with just adding traffic circles everywhere in places?
It's funny you bring that up. I actually want to put a traffic circle around this Capitol, which would just be a metaphor that we just keep going in circles. Thank you very much, guys.